And hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to the first ever Tuesday night episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa, and joining me today from the Bills Chat podcast is Mr. Josh McCarty, who I did warn before we went live that there are technical difficulties with StreamYard, and it seems they're happening tonight. Go figure on the debut. That's not stopping us. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Joe. It did not catch me off guard. You warned me it was a possibility. As somebody who's used to StreamYard, I will tell you it can be very frustrating when you least want it to be. But we will go through, we will power through, and we're going to have a good show.
Powering through is the best phrase, and that's what I love to hear. And yeah, so anyone who has been following this show, anyone who has been a constant viewer of the show, I want to say thank you. So I see RJ here with the surprise episode comment. RJ, it is no longer a surprise. Under Review is now live every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m., 7:35 if there's any technical difficulties like you just witnessed. This is the new format. We are here now, and I am so excited to be able to come to you all in prime time. It is awesome opportunity. Thank you all of the guys at Cover One, to all of you watching. I really, really appreciate it. And Josh, we got a lot to talk about because with the Tuesday show comes Tuesday responsibilities, including talking about the very fun matchup that we got to witness on Sunday afternoon, Bills versus Jets in Buffalo. And many of us, myself included, in my most recent episode, were talking about the idea of Joe Brady and what it would look like against the Jets defense, and kind of saying, well, it's an awful first game for him to have to call plays for with how good that defense is. When I tell you that is the polar opposite of what ended up happening, it is 100% the polar opposite. The Buffalo Bills steamrolled the Jets with a 32-6 total mark. Josh, let's hear your thoughts just on this matchup in general. What did you think? What did you like? What did you dislike?
Well, it was a breath of fresh air for those of us who've been riding the wave this season, especially the way the Bills had looked in the games coming up to this game. You mentioned it. Joe Brady was very much thrown into the deep end, not just against the Jets, but when you look at the Bills' next few games, you got the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, some of the best defenses in the entire sport. So good luck, Joe Brady. Let's hit the ground running. And I think I liked a lot of what I saw from Joe Brady this weekend. And my immediate reaction on our post-game show on Bills Chat was, I think what my frustration was with Ken Dorsey, and what a lot of Bills fans' frustration was, that while we appreciate some of the stuff we saw from Joe Brady, the pre-snap motion, using one play to set up the other play, the way that the play calling sequences made sense, it's not like Joe Brady went out there and reinvented football. These were very basic football things that we were begging for Ken Dorsey to put in his offense that just were not coming consistently. So while I want to give Joe Brady a lot of credit for almost going back to the basics, I really think this was kind of a referendum on Ken Dorsey. This team needed it. They certainly passed the test with flying colors. I know we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of this Jets game, but at least for the first game, this looked like the Buffalo Bills we had been hoping to see. And it's funny that they haven't scored 30 points since week 4, and they come out and do it against a Jets team that hadn't given up 30 points all season.
It hasn't given up that, and also a Jets team that has had their numbers significantly over the past few matchups. What we have all deemed the New York Jets is Josh Allen's kryptonite. It's a team that we were all fully expecting, again, to just give them problems, to play really difficult, sticky quarters coverage, a lot of post-snap disguising, and really a team that does not need to blitz, which is always the most frustrating thing, especially for a quarterback like Allen, because you know that you're not getting an immense amount of pressure as far as the numbers game, but you're still going to feel the pressure because of how talented their defensive line is. So now we witness a matchup where not only do they go out and beat a team that by all means has been a thorn in their side, but dominate them. And it was a lot of fun to watch. It felt like, to put it frankly, an exorcism, in the sense that it was kind of just getting rid of those demons and being able to go out in front of your home crowd after an awful game against Denver and just put up a really good, comforting, almost fully dominant performance, except for the special teams, or not special teams, except for the fourth down Morstead pass, which even then, you look at how that drive went for the Jets. We had to get a I think it was 4th and 5 pass to work to be able to move down the field and score. So it's great. Obviously, I'm aware of the offense they played and the woes of that offense that they played, which is why I didn't really get too heavy in the defensive metrics for this week's episode. But it was reassuring. It was fun. And as far as the Joe Brady front, which is what our topic is going to shift over to now, it was just complete. It felt like like you said, it was kind of not really so much changing too much dramatically because they didn't. It's the same scheme. It's the same use of 11 and 12 personnel. It's the same types of motions you've seen, same types of runs you've seen. The difference is it was complete. It was complementary, and better yet, it was the best execution they've had since that Miami game. It felt like there was concerted efforts to get playmakers the ball, to attack certain parts of the field, and to really just try and get consistent momentum, even despite the fact that they had some poor efficiency metrics. So, Josh, we'll get more into detail on this. What did you think of Joe Brady's first game as the Bills offensive coordinator?
I thought he passed the test. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite things he did is something that actually didn't work. He tried early to get the ball in Diggs' hands on the first two plays of the game. First play of the game, they had set up a screen to Diggs. And right off the bat, the Jets read it perfectly. Josh Allen ends up just throwing the ball into the ground, move on to the next play. The second play, they throw a screen to Diggs, and the Jets are all over it. That play goes nowhere. Give the Jets credit. They're a very good defense. But I like the fact that Joe Brady recognizes he has this alpha all-star receiver in Stephon Diggs. And we've heard many great offensive coaches say, you have to get your top receivers involved early, make them feel like they're part of the game. And just that, trying to get him involved, told me it was a new day. I really appreciated that. And then there was a stat put out by your guys over at Air Raid, who I am a big fan of, by the way. They've come on our show, and a big fan of what they do over there. The Bills motioned on 62.9% of their passes. This is a direct read from their tweet on November 20th. Second highest rate of Allen's career. That is certainly a positive. Now, the motion ends up being kind of a tell because that the motion was predominantly on passing plays, so they got to mix the motions in with the run. But you look at the touchdown to James Cook, it was a perfect layup throw. The layups have not been in this offense. And I don't think it's an accident that when you start drawing up these layups, you start giving pre-snap eye candy that makes the defense wonder what they're looking at, that you start seeing longer rack plays like the Khalil Shakir touchdown, like the Ty Johnson touchdown, because you make the defense think for a second what's going on, and guys with those kind of speed can turn into a game breaker. Those have not been prevalent in the Bills offense, and they were on Sunday.
Yeah, that is probably the best part of the game for me as far as how it was called and kind of intention. So one thing that you've seen guys in our network, guys all over the Bills sect and content creation around the team say is when this offense kind of goes out on the field, it doesn't feel like there's much of, I don't want to say not much of a plan, but not much emphasis on anything like scheming people open. It's more of, again, as Eric has pointed out, coverage beaters. You throw them out there and then you kind of put it on the players to read all the leverages. And in turn, you have your quarterback, Josh Allen, reading the receivers who are reading this. So it's like this chain reaction where you increase the margin of error with each and every wrinkle. In this game, it's not to say that that didn't exist, because that's going to exist when you play offense, because players play. They're adults. They got to read it. They have to be able to know how to attack leverage and how to be able to create space. But you also saw this dependence, or at least like more of a lean on specific positional groups. And like you said, it's really the running backs. I mean, you looked at how they tried to get James Cook in one-on-one matchups and more out in the flat and matching up with linebackers to be able to get himself open, including Ty Johnson, and then also leaning on the run when you needed to do so. Again, not the most efficient running metric. I think they were in the negatives in EPA, but they were still attacking them in a way that felt very focused. And what that did, at least in my opinion, was branch open the middle of the field, which is something that the Bills team has frankly been struggling to do consistently throughout the course of the year. And they're at their best when the middle of the field is at their disposal. And Josh, I mean, we could talk about this more, but specific playmakers like Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, and James Cook, they are so valuable to this part of the field, and what they can offer to them going down the stretch is huge. And you have to be encouraged with what you saw in that game plan, especially that explosive play to Shakir, which was pretty much the most positive Bills offense play I think we've had since Miami.
100%. I mean, I think back to that long catch and run by Diggs against Miami. That's the last time I can remember a play like that. And you nailed it. It's on a day where Stephon Diggs goes for 27 yards, Gabe Davis doesn't get a catch, Josh Allen still throws for 275 yards. If I had told you before the game that would be the scenario, you would have probably drug tested me, because that just doesn't line up with what we have seen from this offense of the Bills that's been very funneled through Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis maybe gets a deep shot over the two. He's not a target monster. Dalton Kincaid certainly has been more targets there, but you would not have thought there was basically 250 yards to go around between the other receivers, and that is what played out. Now, look, it is just a one-game sample size, and I do think there is a strong reality that what we saw on the Jets side of things was a dam that just broke. It's been stressing their defense for weeks. Their offense has been giving them zero support. They were 0 for 11 on third downs against the Bills. You just cannot survive in the NFL like that. And it sure felt like their defense just finally gave in against the Bills. So a lot worked in the Bills' favor, but to their credit, they took advantage of it, because week one against the Jets, the Bills held a 10-point lead at halftime in a game that was very similar to this one, and the Jets outscored them by 16 points the rest of the way. This game against the Jets, the Bills held a 10-point lead at halftime, and they outscored the Jets by 16 the rest of the way. They took care of the football. I don't care about the interception on the Hail Mary. That's a talking point for box score scouts on the national media stage. We know Josh Allen took care of the football. We know the Bills took care of the football, and they weren't going to let their mistakes on offense beat them this time around, when it was painfully obvious to all of us watching that the Jets could not move the football.
And there was a tweet I read about someone who overheard, or was an interview from the Jets locker room, which basically summed up the whole philosophy of that game. And it was crediting Josh Allen and their offense for not getting aggressive. They really took what was given to them. They read the defense the right way. When it was pressure and they needed a hot route to hit, they did it. When it was something open underneath, they took it. It was that mindset of not trying to go overtly aggressive, but being able to allow those explosive opportunities to come to you, that I think was another part of their success, and something that I really loved seeing. And again, we're not talking about a team that we played that had a stellar offense, right? So I think when you talk about this offensive performance, you do have to include the context of very good field position for a vast majority of that game, because frankly, Zach Wilson couldn't move the ball. The Jets couldn't get first downs unless it was a special team pass or some, occasional opening from Garrett Wilson. It was basically the byproduct of an inept offense allowing our offense to kind of find its wings. But to allow optimism in the sec, because I know people are skeptical, you need those games, especially when you have consecutive weeks of just letdown performances. And, Ken Dorsey gets removed from his position. Wish him all the best. Joe Brady is inheriting it as an interim role. Now you oversee this offense, and what is the best thing you could possibly have? A team that you're taking advantage of, and the ability to make yourself feel good when you go into Philadelphia and you play an insanely difficult team in the Eagles. So, well, yes, their offense, the Jets offense, was poor. It allowed for good field position for the Bills. I'm still very encouraged, because at the same time, it's still an elite defense with elite cornerbacks and elite safeties and really good linebackers and a great defensive line. That was a pretty much like 90 to 95% healthy unit with the removal of Michael Carter. And I think Tony Adams left early in the game too. And yes, that does make a difference, but it was still encouraging. And I think that's just what you needed from the Bills offense this week. It didn't have to be perfect. It just needed to show you it was going in the right direction. And I think they did. And I'm very happy about that. But Josh, I do want to ask you, while we're still on the topic of this matchup and while we still get our final days of glorious victory, let's talk about the defense. And if you guys, I got to take the banner away real fast, because you see my tag name, right? Joe to Rasul Douglas. Yeah, because Rasul Douglas is a beast. And I'm not just saying that because of the stat line, but his ability as a zone corner and how tight he plays while allowing almost like this disguise of space before he breaks on the ball is just so freaking impressive, and what this defense needs going up against these tough teams. So, Josh, let's talk about the Bills defense in this game, who were just absolutely dominant, as they should be when you're playing a Zach Wilson-led offense.
Yeah, and I think you have to start with Rasul Douglas, because I did a thought exercise with Luca on our show a couple weeks ago when we were trying to reach for optimism. This was before the Bronco game, and I was like, okay, so what's the path to the Bills winning the Super Bowl? Obviously, it's the offense playing to their potential, but can we fix this defense? And I said, is it realistic that Linval Joseph helps minimize the loss of Daquan Jones? No, he's not going to supplant Daquan Jones, but he can minimize that loss. Yes. And then the third question I asked was, is it possible that by the time he gets ramped up in our system, Rasul Douglas is the best cornerback in this system, regardless of who's healthy or not? That is not a slight at Tre'Davious White. Tre'Davious White has had a hell of a career. He might go up on the Bills' Wall of Fame, but I think if we are honest with ourselves, even before the injury, he was not the vintage Tre'Davious White. And I do think that Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford has a chance to be the best cornerback duo the Bills can throw out there, regardless of combinations that were available to them this season. He has hit the ground running. That was a big hit by Brandon Beane. And then you can never predict injuries, but just look at what happened after they traded for Rasul Douglas. Dane Jackson goes into concussion protocol. Taron Johnson goes into concussion protocol, and Christian Benford gets a hamstring injury. Where would they be without Rasul Douglas? It's scary to think. And for swapping a third for a fifth for a guy who might be now the second or third most important player in your back seven, absolute slam dunk of a trade, and he is absolutely passing the test.
Yes, 100%. And it's invaluable to that room because, again, like you pointed to, and I'm glad you brought it up, the injuries were very unfortunate. And Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, obviously you have Kyer Elam who's sitting on the IR, and then you have to worry about the ghost of Josh Norman looming in the works. It's not a healthy room. And the problem I have is it's frustrating that it is, because it is so talented. And when you have it in its complete status, because Dane Jackson has really stepped up, and I think he's having the best season of his career just in all levels. Christian Benford has proven himself. And then you lose Trey White. So now your other guys, Rasul Douglas, and then you have obviously Taron Johnson in your nickel, but Cam Lewis for depth. It's a good room. It's a very stout room for a team that plays very sticky coverage to begin with. And I'm just kind of frustrated that we're losing these players, but even just to see how valuable Rasul Douglas has been to the room and what he's been able to bring in 2 short weeks makes me really, frankly, encouraged for the future of this defense. Now, those injuries you dealt with Matt Milano, Daquan Jones, Tre'Davious White, who I'm going to quick disagree with you, Josh. I think he was having a fantastic year before he went down, and I think he did regain old form. But with those players going down and you face the injuries, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to get back to their top 5 level and that they're going to get back to where they were prior, because some of those holes are just really hard to overcome. And you're seeing glaring weaknesses at Milano's depth pieces where you're having to force a safety to come up at times because the coverage has been frankly bad. And you're not going to ask Tyrell Dodson to cover good receivers in the middle of the field. Dorian Williams is still learning. That is the point where there is a weakness. And then interior defensive pressure, I think the running defense has actually gotten a bit better over the past couple of weeks, like significantly. And I think that, that can lend itself well to the Bills, but the best teams in the league are going to throw the ball. So those are obviously flaws, but I think that there are pieces that were acquired at the trade deadline or in, free agency that were panning out, or certain things like depth pieces that have been able to kind of be patchwork enough where I think this defense can be serviceable. And really, with an offense that's led by Josh Allen and the potential that you have from it, you just need good. And this was like the whole thing I said about Spencer Brown, Josh. I didn't need Spencer Brown to be elite, right? Because everyone next to him, Torrance is upside. Morris, we know who he is. McGovern's been consistently good in his career. Dawkins is good. We just needed Spencer Brown to be average to good, and you're thriving. That's literally what's happening right now, by the way. This defense, in my eyes, if this team is figuring it out offensively, I just need them to be good. That's it.
I'm with you, and I think they have the chance to be good. If you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, would you sign for average? I would have signed my name in ink wherever I could sign for it. I think they have a chance to be better than that. I like what I've seen from Linval Joseph. You mentioned the run defense has gotten better in recent weeks. I pulled some stats today. On the course of the year, the Bills are 16th in yards per game given up against the run. That's right in the middle of the pack. The last 3 games, they've given up 79.7 yards per game in the rush, top 5 in the NFL. And when you look on a per carry basis, the Bills are giving up 3.1 yards per attempt. That's the best in the NFL the last 3 weeks, which aligns specifically with when Linval Joseph came in. Now, look, they didn't necessarily play the Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Niners those last 3 weeks. We get that, but it's still improvement. And these are the kind of teams you have to be able to have success against. You mentioned Rasul Douglas. Also, there was no replacing Matt Milano when he went down. You're just not going to, unless Fred Warner is going to show up on your doorstep, you're not going to replace a player like that. And I know there's a lot of talk today about Darius Leonard, and I get the appeal of that, but My thing all along about Matt Milano has been, one, you have found money in Terrell Bernard. When the season started, we were just hoping that Terrell Bernard would not embarrass himself at linebacker, and he has evolved into a star. He is a star linebacker. It's a shame we can't watch him play next to Matt Milano for the entire season, but you have to almost look at it like, okay, Terrell Bernard replaces Matt Milano. That's your star linebacker. Can Tyrell Dodson, for now, and the combination of Jordan Poyer coming in dime, or maybe Dorian Williams gets another look at some point later in the year, can they just be a baseline starter, which is what we were hoping Terrell Bernard could be? Then you've kind of replaced what you thought you had. So I look at it like that. That kind of keeps my glass half full, that Terrell Bernard's ascension and the fact that he's maintained this level of play after Milano and Daquan Jones went down kind of solidified him as that star level player. That gives me optimism. So yeah, I think this defense has every chance to be good enough to actually help the Bills win games and not just be along for the ride with the offense. And there is still that tiny wild card of if we get Von Miller back closer to what we hoped he could be.
And I want to preface before I say my point, for the Von Miller discourse in general, I think there's been a lot of negative conversation surrounding Von. And listen, we know who he is. He's a future Hall of Fame linebacker, but let's call it what it is, defensive end. And he is not playing up to par right now, and I understand that. I mean, I've watched him both like back on all 22 and just in the game, and you could see that there's kind of a step missing, and we know this. But we also got to remember that this Thursday, well, not exactly a year to date, but still relatively close to a perfect year, will be the anniversary of Von Miller tearing his ACL against Detroit. And that is a tough injury to come back from. You saw Tre'Davious White last year come back from an ACL tear and not really look like himself immediately. And then this year, unfortunately, he did get hurt again. But prior to that, was playing at what a lot of us considered a Pro Bowl to All-Pro level. He was really that good. You were not throwing to Tre'Davious White, and he was making plays on the ball. I think we just need to, as fans, be patient with Von Miller, understand that where the snap count is for him, how they are working him back in is all calculated, all planned. And I would much rather have Von come back progressively and slowly than rush him back and run the risk of re-injury. And as he continues to get game action, he will continue to get more confidence on his knee, be able to get his inside move back, and really have a stout performance. And if that's the end of this year, great. But even if it isn't, I'll wait for next year. And I'm dead serious, because another player I want to give a shout out to, Leonard Floyd, who has been just an absolutely incredible signing by Brandon Beane. We all knew what he was going into free agency. We all knew what he was when we signed him. He is a veteran pass rusher who has played on some really good defensive lines and has a great resume. And he is everything to this defensive line right now. So I just wanted to point him out. In general, I want to point Ed Oliver out to say he has been really, really freaking good and playing above his contract. Like Josh, I mean, any other defensive players you could point out, not even just from this game, but over the past couple of weeks that you've just been impressed by?
Well, I want to say something about Ed Oliver, because to be fair, I was somebody that never believed in Ed Oliver. Like when they drafted him, I was thrilled. As his career progressed, I was like, I see good. I don't really see great. And then when they signed into a contract, I was like, okay, well, that's below the top of the market. I get it. They're kind of betting on continued development, which is kind of a dice roll when you're talking about the fourth year of a player. You don't necessarily see people blossom into stars 4 to 5 years in their career. Normally they're there. Ed Oliver has absolutely blossomed into a star. You look at some of his metrics of double team rate and pressure rate and how he's as good against the run when he's double teamed as a lot of defensive tackles are when they're single blocked. The Bills, when you look at this defense, one of the major concerns was, okay, well, in the next year or two, it's going to be kind of out with the old of the Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, maybe Taron Johnson, Von Miller, and where's this next wave of stars? And we've already mentioned two guys that I'm confident in saying are stars, Terrell Bernard and Ed Oliver. And with the Von Miller point, look, if we don't get Von Miller back, I am with you. To me, anything you get out of Von Miller the rest of the way this year, including playoffs, is a bonus. The Bills have enough on the defensive line to get it done with what they have, with Leonard Floyd having a career year, Ed Oliver certainly having a career year. I do expect Gregory Rousseau, as that foot injury continues to get better, to show a little bit stronger as the season goes on. I think AJ Epinesa has had more flashes this year than we have seen in recent years. Jordan Phillips certainly has the potential to flash. Is it going to be the best defensive line in the sport? Probably not, but it's not going to embarrass you, and that's really all you want out of that. You asked for another player to mention. Look, I'm a big Christian Benford guy. I really am. I don't know that he's ever going to be the best cornerback in football, but to find a cornerback in the 6th round in his second year that comes in and you don't worry about on that side of the field as a starting cornerback in the NFL, that, again, found money. He's not a star and not yet. I think he may evolve into that in this system. I think he has that potential, but the fact that you have him out there and you don't worry about his position says a lot about that kid, and that's really exciting.
Yes, very much so. And I mean, listen, they didn't give up Elam either. They didn't give him up at the deadline. I think they're committed to him. I think if you get anything out of him, that's also a bonus and just something to shore up the room too. So haven't forgotten about Elam, but definitely hoping that he could take that step forward. But yeah, I mean, to get back to kind of the conversation before too, like when we're talking about the performance of this defense, and again, it is injury ridden, but when you see just what you're getting out of some of these guys, and Terrell Bernard being one of them, the emergence of Ed Oliver, who without Daquan Jones, I was really worried would regress, but didn't. He is still like being himself and playing above it. And I think that also has to do with the fact that, no, I'm going to knock on wood, soft tissue injury or anything stupid like that to hinder his performance and make him play at a slower level where he's kind of nursing himself back. I think, unfortunately, that injury bug got passed off to Gregory Rousseau, which is why you're not seeing that same level of dominance that he frankly had the first couple of weeks. But it is a defense that's patchwork, but one that still is playing better and better with each week. And I mean, listen, that Denver game, they held their own for a few quarters. They had a hard time getting off the field, but they weren't giving up points. The Cincinnati game, it started out ugly. They made key adjustments and played significantly better in the second half of that game, only giving up 3 points to Burrow's offense. But again, the offense couldn't contribute. This game, what you just saw was complete. And while it was a Zach Wilson-led offense, I'm very pleased with the performance. I'm pleased with the pass rush. I'm pleased with the coverage. And I think you just needed, again, to tie it back to the whole thing and whole attitude of the game, you needed the confidence booster going up against Philadelphia. You needed that spark. I think they got it, but now time will tell if we are able to see that trend continue. And now I'm going to ask you, Josh, because we're on this topic and I see it being mentioned in the chat. Injuries. They suck. We hate them. Yeah. We're not happy about them. And unfortunately, some of the players, like we mentioned before, that are at least at this point, we could say questionable, but currently in concussion protocol. Dane Jackson, Taron Johnson. So 2 blows to the corner room, 1 absolutely massive blow. And I think Steve Noble earlier had a really good comment this. So it was, if Taron cannot go this weekend, it would not surprise me if we see a lot of base 4-3 with Bernard, Williams, and Dotson. So I'm going to tie this into our injury conversation, but what do you think of this concept? And then what do you think of how they would have to respond if these players can't go?
I like Steve's thought process. So when I disagree with you, Steve, I hope you don't take that as anything other than just two people sharing a different opinion. But the one reason why I would disagree is with the Dallas Goedert injury on Philly's side, you're seeing them go to a lot more 11 personnel. So I think that will force the Bills' hand to stay in a nickel look. And then my other piece of that is I don't know who that third linebacker is that you would trust more than Cam Lewis. I will say I do think there is a world this weekend where you have the Eagles who run the ball 47% of the time, which is one of the top 5 in the NFL. You could see necessarily if Taron Johnson can't go, which hopefully he can, hopefully it's a non-issue. Maybe it's a Saran Neal game at nickel where you want a little bit more size and physicality. And maybe it's not a Cam Lewis game where you're getting more of a coverage aspect, or maybe they rotate those guys around a little bit more. But as far as the base, I would say they probably only do that when the Eagles come out with base personnel, which just is not going to be very often.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I don't think, because we've seen like slight examples of base, but it hasn't been something they lead on. Like McDermott's a nickel guy. That's what he likes to run. That's why you have the depth pieces there. It is a drop-off in dependence and talent when you go from Taron Johnson to Saran Neal. But I think you would rather try to keep that formation the same than go back into base. But I do think you could roll it out. And if you were to do it, I think if you're running base 4-3, I know Dotson has been honestly a lot better in run defense over the past few weeks. He's played a lot better, But I think if we're talking about the coverage aspect of it, I'd kind of rather have Williams because I just like his length and his ability to navigate the field. And I also like the upside of the rookie. I don't think he's played spotless at all. I think there was room for improvement in Dorian Williams' game. But I think if you're asking me who I would rather have out there, if we're talking about offenses that will pass, even though the Eagles do run a majority of the time, like you alluded to, I still want Dorian Williams out there over Dotson. But he's played better. And Steve, we appreciate your comment. But yeah, Josh, these injuries are just concerning. And it's a frustrating season when even those small victories and those good games and those things that the team could pat themselves on the back for are shadowed because you see something like this happen, or scares like Rasul Douglas almost getting taken out by Williams on a friendly fire tackle after the pick at the end of the game, which, fingers crossed, that doesn't actually amount to anything. But what's your honest prediction for Sunday's game? Do you think that these guys, it's hard for me to say because we don't have a lot of information at the moment, but given what you saw and just given your general outlook, what do you think?
As far as who wins the game or just these injuries if they're going to play?
Just these play. We'll get to who wins the game.
Okay, I got you. I wanted to make sure I stay in order.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. So it's an interesting spot. If the Bills had one more win in their pocket, just one more win, they get the Broncos game to the garage, I would look at this spot and say, it's an NFC game. They have a bye week on the other side. Anybody that's remotely close, just give them the week off. Let's get through the bye week. Let's get ready for Kansas City. Let's get healthy. And historically, the Bills have been a little bit more conservative on the side of injuries. Now, what's interesting about the two injuries we mentioned with Taron Johnson and Dane Jackson is they are concussions. So a lot of the decisions are made for you by the independent neurologist. So I don't know. What you could see the Bills do, and teams have done this, is players clear concussion protocol and the team still hold them out. So they still have that ability to be conservative on that. But I would say the Bills probably go with more of an all hands on deck approach. If they're up and they're ready to go, I think the Bills will throw them out there because of the situation the Bills are in, being a 6-5 football team. I do think they have to find a way to win one of these next two games against Philly and Kansas City. And as we will get into when we talk about this matchup, I know Philadelphia is a scary team. I think the Bills can punch with these guys. So I would not go into this thinking, well, we're going to lose anyway, so let's rest our guys. The Bills are 3.5-point underdogs on the road in Philly for a reason. And when I deep dove into this team today, I saw a lot of those reasons.
Yeah, and even watching the Eagles last night too, and the Eagles are 9-1. This is, I don't want anyone to take what I am about to say as disrespect. I respect every team you play. I don't care what your record is because I think that you are deserving of the team's best every single week. If I was a coach, I'd tell players that. The Eagles are a team that punches down. They do. They play teams really tight, and they often play to the level of their opponent. You've seen them go up against teams like Washington, where they've honestly given up a lot of points and played them really close up until the end of the game. You've seen them play the Patriots really tight, and granted, that's week one, but they're not invincible, right? That every team has a weakness. Every team has an Achilles heel. Every team has the ability to be beat. And I do think that with that in mind, you want to go up and face them and rise to the test, and you want to have your players there. But I love that you brought up the fact that if they had one more win, we treat it differently. Because if two plays go differently this season, this could be an 8-win Bills team going into Philadelphia where, oh man, we just lost Dane and we just lost Taron Johnson, but the bye's there. It's an NFC game. This doesn't matter. Let's just let it go. Let's just play. Which, listen, I'm not going to say a coach actually thinks like that, but you have to play the risk game and the season game on it. So for that reason, if they had 2 more wins, I'd say they'd probably sit them 2. I agree with you, but if they can play, they're going to play. And it just sucks that it's concussion protocol. Obviously, I'm one of those people who supports the health of the players, supports everybody. I want them to be their healthiest self. And if that means they can't go, they cannot go. And I would never want any player to be forced out there. But it's just, the timing and the injury bug that this team has faced this year, you kind of just shrug your shoulders at this point and go, well, there you go again. Here it goes again. But I think it's time that we start talking about this matchup, Josh. I know that's the crux. We got to look ahead to Sunday. But before we move on, everybody, all 109 4, it keeps fluctuating, that all of you have joined the very first Tuesday night episode of Under Review. I want to first and foremost say thank you all so much for being here. I truly appreciate you watching. If you are listening to this after the fact, I appreciate you all the same. If you could please, all of you, do me a huge favor and like this video, it would mean the world to me. It would mean the world to everyone here at Cover One. If you could go on our channel, check out some awesome content there. If you could check out Josh's pod with Luca, the Bills Chat pod. Do I have that right? Is it the Bills Chat pod, or do you just go by Bills Chat?
Bills Chat podcast.
Bills Chat pod, perfect. So check him out. Check out everybody that's making content in this space. Everyone would appreciate it. But I truly, truly am thankful for all of you. And this is a weekly thing now, guys. Tuesday night, Under Review, every single week. So if you are a first-time viewer because you couldn't check me out on Saturdays, I'm here to stay. And if you hate my face, I'm still here to stay. Sorry, I can't help you with that. I do have a pretty punchable face, though. But I want to also tell you all about the Cover One Pass, which is in the description below. So as if you were not here for the start of the show, unfortunately, the roles are not working on the debut night, which is always a pleasure. Thank you, StreamYard. I'm so thankful for that. But One Pass, sign up link in the description below. That is the backbone of Cover One. That is the spine. That is the driving force behind this network. All of the resources that we have access to and all of the ability to make great content comes from your subscription to that One Pass. You can join the premium Slack channel, have 24/7 Bills discussion with some great, insightful people, check out some cool behind the scenes and some insider info from our higher ups. Get an awesome t-shirt. Who does not like awesome t-shirts? I know I love awesome t-shirts. Josh, do you like awesome t-shirts?
Who doesn't love an awesome t-shirt?
Exactly, which is why you should check the description below and sign up if you have not signed up already. We would appreciate it. And again, remember to subscribe to Cover One, drop a like on this video, and let's continue the conversation. And we are about to preview the ever so fun and ever so terrifying matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, a matchup that we all knew was coming, circled on the schedule. We were prepared to see a difficult game in the later stretch of the season, but what we were not prepared for was just how much it means, even though it is an NFC game, considering the current record of this team. So before we get in depth, reading off some of the Eagles' current stats in DVOA, they are the 6th ranked DVOA offense with the 17th ranked DVOA defense and 5th in special teams. As far as advanced offense, 6th total, 9th in pass, 5th in rushing. And then for their defensive DVOA, they are 19th in pass DVOA and 5th in rushing DVOA. Not all that shocking considering that their line is a bunch of really, really big, scary dudes who are really good at football and a really kind of hit or miss back end with some good corners, but all in all inconsistent passing defense. So let's talk about it. Tell me how you're feeling about this matchup.
So when I went in to scout the Eagles this week, today really, I was thinking I was going to go into this and find a team that was just going to overmatch the Bills. When you think about the Eagles, you think about a team that just runs the ball as well as anybody in the sport, maybe outside of San Francisco and Miami. And then you think about, oh man, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. And you think about all the names on defense, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, that defensive line that just has blue chip after blue chip player. And then you start diving into, and I'll start on the defensive side of things. They are a scary defense. They have a very good defensive line. But I think their defense, in a lot of ways, particularly in the back seven, is more name than game. Darius Slay is still a very good player, which is impressive because he's 32 years old. James Bradbury is not a very good player. Opposing quarterbacks have 111.8 quarterback rating against him. He has fallen off in a big way. Avonte Maddox, their preferred slot corner, is a good player, but he's out. And his backup, Zach McPherson, has been out since week 2. So they have been throwing Bradley Roby out there, who's been playing okay, but I think you can get this team in the slot, which is notable because Stephon Diggs has played in the slot about 31% of the time this year. Last week, he was there almost 40% of the time. I think Diggs is going to get a heavy dose of slot snaps because Slay and Bradbury stick to their sides. That is one way you can get Diggs in a favorable matchup. I don't want to sit here and just, spew my entire Eagle scouting report because I have things on offense that kind of make me feel good about that. But at least right off the cuff, I think this is a defense the Bills are going to be able to put points up on. I think that their trade for Kevin Byard was a home run. He stabilized that back seven. They have an injury at linebacker with Nakobe Dean, which for them is kind of a blessing in disguise, because I do think right now Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham are better football players than Nakobe Dean. He was lost out there. But in general, I think if you can protect against this defensive line, which is no easy task, they are the real deal. You can give Josh Allen time, or he puts on his cape and gives himself time, the way we have seen time and time again. There are going to be plays to be made. But I will say, the Bills cannot win this game with another 0 from Gabe Davis this week. He is going to have to contribute. He's going to have to make a play or two. Doesn't have to be 5, 6, 7 catches, but I would like to see a deep bomb to Gabe Davis at some point in this game. But I think the Bills are going to be able to score some points on this defense.
Firmly agree. When I talk about what encourages me about this matchup before we get more into it, it's our passing offense versus their defense, specifically after what we just saw against the Jets. Now, again, 1 game sample size. I'm not in over my head here. I understand that what we saw could have just been a flash and nothing more, or it could be the start of a trend. We really don't know because we have not seen it yet. But when I think of the Philadelphia Eagles defense right now, and I think of some key injuries and some underwhelming performances and inconsistency on the backside, despite having Byard and Slay, who are very good, I think that comes with opportunity. And I think that comes with the opportunity to get a little more creative and to involve some people that, again, for the first really 10 games of the season, weren't getting as involved. And I pull up this Charles G comment because it presents something. Rice, it says Rice took Slay's ankles in space last night. I think that's how you do it, to be honest. I think this is where you get the Eagles on their heels defensively, and that's by getting the ball in Cook's hands, in Kincaid's hands, in Shakir's hands. The really short to intermediate part of the field tacticians get the ball in their hands and try to create some yak and create some opportunity to maybe get an explosive play from broken contact or a missed tackle, because the Eagles seem to have that kind of problem on their defensive side where they are, and again, the Bills kind of have this too in a way, so, vice versa, but an issue where they can over pursue or maybe just get shaken out of their cleats a little bit. And I think if you can kind of create, like you saw against the Jets, that opportunity to get the running backs the ball quickly, maybe in screens, maybe in short passes up the middle, checkdowns to the flat, you have an opportunity to really exploit that tackling woe problem they kind of have this year and get some yards after the catch, create easier opportunities on first, second down, be able to move the ball methodically, but also do it efficiently, but not in a way where it's, it has to be perfect execution, but really the chance to kind of exploit a matchup that I think more teams are going to try to do against Philadelphia as the season goes on. But again, when you talk about running the ball, Kansas City did have success, but I also still think you got to respect Philadelphia's defensive line. You got to respect Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and Cass. They are a really stout, solid, disciplined unit. And when it comes to passing offense, you have to respect the pass rush. And as much as I think that Josh Allen is going to have the ability to carve out the middle of the field, I think Joe Brady is going to make an effort to, again, scheme guys like Kincaid and Shakir open and maybe have those soft spots in zone that he can take advantage of. I also think that it's going to be a game where you emphasize getting the ball out of your hands quickly and, again, working those shorter spots. So let's get more into it, Josh. Talk to me a little bit more about your thoughts on this offense, Bills offense versus the Eagles defense, and kind of what you're expecting to see just from like a game plan standpoint.
Well, you mentioned taking stuff underneath. That is kind of the Eagles' MO, is they like to make you go the distance. They like paper cuts. They don't want to get out the big play. They play kind of a too high shell. So I do think it's important for Josh Allen to take those checkdowns to Kincaid, to Cook, to Shakir when they present themselves. I do want to see the Bills continue to use the under center offense. We saw more last week. I think that does put defenses in a bind, particularly if they have to respect the Josh Allen run. He is excellent at play action. I do think when you put them in shotgun nonstop, that it does take away some of the guessing game of what the Bills are going to do. And then as far as what I think that the Bills are going to do against this team, I think we're going to see Josh Allen more design runs. We saw hints of that last week, and it just so happened they didn't need them at some certain point. I think a lot of times with Josh Allen, particularly in games against NFC teams who aren't used to seeing him, he can catch you off guard. He's faster than you think. He's more athletic than you think. You look at him on TV, you might be thinking, oh, he's just a big goofy quarterback. And then you get out there and he's outrunning linebackers. He has a chance, I think, to make some hay in the running game. I would expect a couple things early. One, I think that they will go to Diggs early. I do think they're going to have some design runs for Josh Allen early. And then this is another point I wanted to bring up, and I'll try to find my note on this because I thought this was kind of stark here. Right now, okay, here we go. The Eagles, for as good as their defense is perceived to be, they are not good at preventing touchdowns in the red zone. Opponents are converting touchdowns 62.5% of the time once they get to the Eagles red zone. That's 25th in the NFL, 32nd being the worst. They're 25th. Buffalo is third in the entire sport at converting red zone trips to touchdowns 65% of the time. I think once we spin it around and talk about offense, there's going to be some matchups that the Eagles like. I know some folks are worried that we're seeing Sean McDermott be more conservative. There were some field goals and punts last week that caught people off guard. You're playing your opponent. This is a week that I would expect to see the more aggressive Sean McDermott come out. I don't think we're going to see 4th and 2 field goals in the red zone. I do think the Bills are going to go for it. Every time the Bills, you could say this every week about every opponent. I get it. This is like grade A baseline analysis. When the Bills are in the red zone, if they kick a field goal, it's a loss. So just keep that in mind as the game goes on. This is an Eagles team that doesn't get very stingy in the red zone. I expect the Bills to be able to take advantage of trips down there.
Yeah, and we got to also say, again, like you're playing an elite defense that is very good at condensing the field and very good at making it harder for you to score when you get closer. I don't think it's the same with Philadelphia. So, those field goals aren't going to be field goals. You're probably going for touchdowns. And again, McDermott is typically ranking at the top of the league in aggressiveness and decisions to go for it. Hell, he went for it on the other half of the field with Ty Johnson on 4th and 1. And guess what that turned into? So I'm not really worried about McDermott being overtly conservative in this game. I think this is kind of what you got to be at this point in the season with the record you have, is you have to be able to express that you're aggressive and that you don't want to lose. And by doing so, you'll go for it on those 4th down situations in the red zone. And I think they're going to do that frequently. But yeah, from a game plan perspective, like I think that's what it is. I think it's going to be trying to get quick hits with Allen and trying to generate the explosive plays as best as you can. If they're playing too high and they leave you a lot of open space or maybe some space that you can exploit if you get a quick pass out, try to do that and try to take advantage of the yards after contact. And I mean, listen, Kansas City had success running the ball yesterday. For as good as their D-line is, you can kind of take advantage of aggressiveness by maybe forcing someone to sway too far inside and getting a hole on the outside or vice versa. And I think James Cook is having a really good year. He's 3rd in rushing yards so far this year, averaging 5 yards a carry. So continuing on from where he left off last season in that regard and showing that he's a fully capable back. I think speed kills. I think guys that are elusive are going to really hurt this Eagles defense. And I think that's where you attack them. But also, when you talked about Josh Allen designed runs, yes, I want more of that. I know that they were kind of hesitant with the shoulder injury and they were really trying to stay, but I want to see more Josh Allen runs. I think that's how the offense gets galvanized. I think that Allen is showing that he's making a kind of step forward in decision making when he runs, because he did slide. He also got shoulder checked by Tristan Whitehead. Good and bad, baby steps. We'll take it, Josh Allen. I want to see some of those quarterback designed runs too, because again, if you don't know where the ball's going, and this is a team that likes to have RPO in their offense, and you have to worry about Allen taking off, and Allen can go off script or even move the pocket, which is he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league at doing this, to create openings and to create options for himself down the field by extending plays, then this is what you got to do. But in order to really enforce that you can really get away with it as an offense and have this defense wondering if you're going to take off and maybe have a linebacker come up and the ability to kind of draw them off to get your opening, you got to run. And that's why I want to see Josh Allen get those runs more. And again, while I think they're going to be more pass heavy, I think that will be a part of it, Josh. I agree with you. And let's flip it over to defense. I mean, again, I'm a little more concerned about this matchup, just to say that to preface, but how are you feeling about it? What do you see happening?
Well, they're a handful. I mean, for my money, they had the best 1-2 punch at wide receiver in the league. And I understand who Miami has. I understand who Cincinnati has. I think that highly of Devonta Smith, even though he's had a little bit of a down year. And I think that highly of A.J. Brown. And I think that highly of the guy throwing the ball. I think the combination of what they have with Jalen Hurts throwing the ball to them is something special. And what we will see is if Taron Johnson misses this game, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith both go to the slot about 20% of the time. I do think they will force the issue there because we know Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford are pretty much going to stick to their sides. And that would be a situation that might lean into Cam Lewis being on the field. But he will certainly get help if he's matched up on any of those guys. The problem is with two excellent receivers, you can't really bracket one of them, even though A.J. Brown certainly is the alpha in that mix. I will say, when you think about this Eagles team, the main thing you think about is how well they run the ball, and they certainly do. That has tailed off in recent weeks. In the first 3 games of the season, they had 2 200-yard rushing games. They've had 0 since. And when you look at Jalen Hurts, a few weeks ago, he developed an injury, a lower body injury, and he just doesn't look right. He's not passing the eye test as somebody that has full mobility. I will say, Joe, they are a tricky offense to scout from a stat perspective because I wanted to go look at Jalen Hurts' rushing stats to see has he tailed off. But you talk about a team that will quarterback sneak it 6 or 7 times a game, and then they also will kneel it down 2 or 3 times a game. There's 10 rushing attempts right there, and that looks like, oh man, they're running their quarterback a lot. So I had a hard time quantifying how much they're running. But here's what I found. In the last 3 games, Jalen Hurts' most explosive run is 10 yards. And, for a guy that you're used to seeing make highlight level runs, that's not nothing. And then reading some Eagles writers, one reason why the Eagles running game has not been as efficient recently is because defenses are no longer respecting Jalen Hurts' ability to take off while he's hurt. And when you have a quarterback that can run like Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray when he was really going, or like even when the Bills had Tyrod and their running game was unstoppable, you always have to think about if the quarterback keeps the ball and bails out the backside and there's nobody there. So the defensive end has to contain. You have to think for an extra second. It opens up the running game. Right now, defenses aren't having to do that. They're daring Jalen Hurts to run the ball, and it's allowing them to focus more on the pass. So if the Bills can contain this running game without having to overcommit to it, to suck up linebackers and safeties, and then all of a sudden it's just completions all day, I think the Bills are in a really good spot to go punch for punch, even with the Eagles offense. But if Jalen Hurts looks like vintage Jalen Hurts and he is looking healthier and they're able to run the ball effectively, it could be a long day for the Bills defense, but that's why we need the Bills offense to make it a long day for the Eagles defense.
100%. And I think I'm expecting a shootout in this game for that reason. Again, I think with how much pressure has been put on this defense the past couple of weeks, I'm worried about the Eagles being able to sustain drives, even if you get them off the field, but giving up field goals or getting, however many drives or however many downs it takes to get them off the field. That's been my concern with the offense slumping. But if your offense is able to move the ball and get those explosive plays, I'll be a little less concerned about it. But yeah, Jalen Hurts under pressure. And I think the Kansas City game last night, I'm really glad that we got a night before the show to actually watch, kind of the most recent Philadelphia performance and kind of see them get neutralized in a way. Their running game was still really good. DeAndre Swift in this matchup is probably the player I fear the most. I have infinite respect for Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. I think they're great receivers, and I think both are explosive playmakers. But I think if you're able to take Swift out of the game, you're able to take it out of the game and have a lot more success. And I think Jalen Hurts was really feeling the pressure yesterday. And I think as a quarterback, when he feels the pressure, you can bait him into making some inaccurate throws, especially if he's not running right now. This Bills defense has been very good at getting pressure over the past couple of weeks. I think McDermott's ability to disguise his blitzes as well as his aggressiveness and sending some of those cover zeros or sending some 5, 6, even 7-man pressures, that is something that I'm really excited to see him work with against Philadelphia, because I think flooding the pocket and taking those reads away from Jalen Hurts is how you're going to beat the Eagles. Because you got to remember, too, for most of that game against Kansas City and in times where they've been neutralized, they've really had their success on deep shot explosive plays or plays that have been broken where Hurts has been able to escape the pocket and kind of assess the middle of the field, because Jalen Hurts is really good. But if Jalen Hurts is in any way hindered by his injury and you're not worried about him running, like you said, and now you're forcing the pocket to collapse on him and they're not having success running the ball, I think you're going to hurry him up to a point where you start getting some errant throws and generate turnover opportunity. And Jalen Hurts is one of the most consequential quarterbacks in the league as far as EPA sacrificed on a turnover. So if you are having a game plan where you are sending pressure and really forcing Hurts to get the ball out quickly, and I know Philadelphia likes to run those screens, but if you're stacking the box and being able to hit the pressure and take those away quickly, I could foresee a lot of success for the defense. However, it's a tall task. Philadelphia's offensive line is very, very, very good. And again, you don't deny the existence of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and the explosiveness that they generate, and also their ability to have A.J. Brown work the middle of the field or be an explosive 50-50 deep downfield receiver. it's a pipe dream to expect you to shut down the Eagles. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this Bills team will give up at least 24 points. And again, I expect it to be a back and forth shootout with the hope that if the defense is able to generate anything for this potential win, it's turnovers.
Yeah, I'm with you. And we saw the Bills get back to turning the ball over last week on defense, which was very nice to see because they have not been doing a very good job of that. You mentioned the success the Chiefs had last night. They got Jalen Hurts to the ground 5 times. Now, the Chiefs have a very underrated defense. And I think if you haven't been watching the Chiefs very closely this year, you might just still think of them as the same old Chiefs that can score 40 points and their defense just kind of is along for the ride. That is very much not the story for these Chiefs. Their defense in a lot of ways is carrying their team while they're still sorting out who they can count on offense outside of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. But the Chiefs defense is excellent. They did a very good job of keeping Hurts in line. And you mentioned the screen passes. Boy, was that weird. There were so many screens last night. It got to the point where, and I had the volume down on my TV because I was watching multiple games and kind of playing with my kids. And I'm guessing it had to be weather related, because maybe the ball was slick, because it was like 4 or 5 plays in a row or screen. And it was either, okay, Jalen Hurts is seeing ghost and they don't trust him to throw a pass out there, or they just see something. But the Chiefs are an excellent tackling defense.
Yep.
And I didn't understand that. They felt like give up plays, but it was a weird game all around. I was surprised the Eagles pulled it out. And quite honestly, I mean, MVS dropping that wide open ball, the Chiefs should have won the game. And I think that does give you some optimism on some of the stuff we're talking about on the other side of the ball with the Bills putting up points against them. Is there were a lot of plays last night to be made for Chiefs receivers, and they just dropped the ball. And I know we're talking about defense, but that is one more point I wanted to bring up. The Eagles bracketed Kelce last night all night long, and they dared the other receivers to beat them. They can do that with Diggs if they want to. Diggs is not used to being double teamed. He certainly can beat a double team. But it's on the Dalton Kincaids and the Shakirs and the Cooks, who I think are better complementary pieces than what they have in Kansas City, to make plays. I think they'll be able to do that.
You're seeing an emergence in the supporting cast that I think you needed to see to have any faith in this offense. And when you see performances from Khalil Shakir, who had 110 yards and an 81-yard touchdown, you see Dalton Kincaid being kind of like what we were hoping, a chain mover that's working the middle of the field, being able to reveal the soft spots in zone, getting open if you have a linebacker matchup on him, be an all-around threat. I have faith in the supporting cast, but I think I would need to have I would be more optimistic if I had a bigger sample size from Joe Brady. I think there's encouraging signs from his performance, but I would like to see it again, more of a concerted effort to scheme these guys open. Because if you're concerned about Diggs getting double teamed and he's not going to be your slot receiver, then yeah, I think there's value in trying to work some plays where maybe you just create some confusion on the secondary and there's soft openings for Shakir or Kincaid. And again, you talked about Gabe Davis earlier. Gabe Davis is doing a lot of back end work. He is doing a lot of back end work. It's not stat sheet work, but there are blocks he's laying down for the running game that have been very effective. There are decoy routes that he's running that are able to get people open. And there are just moves he's making that are slowing people down enough to create those openings. So at the same time, and I know Judge said this yesterday, and again, Eric's pointed it out in the film, this is a guy who right now isn't putting up insane numbers, but he does have a role on this team and I think does have value there. So even if Gabe doesn't have otherworldly numbers or only puts up like a 3 reception, 40-yard performance, it's that back end work that I care about more. And if Joe Brady has a plan for Davis that doesn't necessarily involve him being the star of the show, but rather just doing his due diligence to work for other people, then I'm really fine with it. And I hope it pans out. But I also wanted to bring up one thing, Josh, and I want to get your opinion on this before we wrap it up. But Dallas Goedert is also hurt, and he's not going to be in this game. I think that is also a very big blow for Philadelphia's offense. And they also, I don't know the extent of his injury, but another tight end gets hurt yesterday who was filling in for Goddard. So now you're dealing with that injured room. And I'm just wondering if that really does stymie a lot of what Philadelphia wants to do offensively. They are a team that does 11 and 12 personnel like the Bills. That's their main two. But he's a big player for their offense. And what do you think about him being hurt and how that might benefit the Bills?
Oh, it's a massive injury. Dallas Goedert is an excellent tight end. Like the tight end class really is Travis Kelce by himself. And then you have George Kittle and, maybe Mark Andrews in there, but Dallas Goedert's in that next tier. He is everything that I think a lot of us hoped that Dawson Knox would be. That's not a shot at Dawson Knox, but Dallas Goedert is a big-bodied receiver. He is third on the team in targets this year for a reason, only behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And you mentioned it, with him being out, their next target monster in the offense is DeAndre Swift. And then you're talking about the next receiver on the list with targets is Zacchaeus with 13 targets on the year. So I think what you'll see is a lot of passes toward Gainwell, who they like to use in multiple roles. I think you'll see a lot of passes towards Swift, but the Bills, I think, are going to be able to concentrate a lot on A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. They have been working Julio Jones in a little bit, but I don't know. It's 2023. How scared of Julio Jones are you really going to be?
Especially on a bubble screen.
Right. Like that. When they saw that, I was like, did they know they were throwing it to Julio Jones? And then I think the tight end that got hurt last night was Jack Stoll, if I remember correctly. I felt like he came back in. I could be wrong about that, but he's
maybe I might have missed it. That would be my bad if so.
He's not somebody that moves the meter. Quez Watkins is a guy that can absolutely fly. He's kind of a one-trick pony, but boy, if he gets behind you, there's nobody on the Bills defense that can run with him. So he's somebody you have to watch out for. Maybe he gets involved a little bit more, but to your point, Dallas Goedert is absolutely the third person they feed in this offense. Him being out is one thing that benefits the Bills. And I don't want to let this show go by without mentioning something logistically that I think really benefits the Bills. The Bills played Sunday. The Chiefs played Monday night, and they're traveling home from Kansas City. They have a short week. That's one thing. Two, if you believe in sandwich games, the Chiefs played the team that beat them in the Super Bowl, and then they play the Bills, and then next week they play the team they played in the NFC Championship game, who everybody says is the NFC Championship game rematch this year, the 49ers, and oh, by the way, they play the Cowboys the next week. So human tendency tells you that it would be amazing for the Eagles to be up for all four of these games. I do think there might be something to the fact that the Eagles winning last night is actually good for the Bills, where, a lot of effort, energy put into winning last week. And I don't know. It could all amount to nothing. It's one of those things that if the Bills win, I'm sure we'll use it to tell the story. Who knows? It feels a lot like the jet lag when they played Jacksonville. You never know until it actually ends. But I do think it's one of these situations without Goddard, with Hurts hobbling, with the Bills being desperate, with the Eagles potentially looking ahead to the 49ers and the Cowboys. I don't know how well the Bills match up with the Eagles, but if they're ever going to beat the Eagles, this is the perfect spot.
It's a shame that we have to say we're the other side of the trap game. Like for the past couple of years, we've talked about, well, this could be a trap game because this team is spunky. And it's like, oh my God, we're 6-5 and we're the trap game. And we have to worry about that. But it does feel like a winnable game. I think losing Goddard means you lose an element of the Eagles offense that they do rely on for certain plays, but they're still dangerous and you got to respect it. But the complexion of this game, the complexion of how the Eagles will attack you is just unfortunately going to come down to this injury report and whether we have these players on the field or not. Because if you don't have Johnson, if you don't have Dane Jackson, it's going to be really, really tough. And I love Benford, and I obviously have lauded the play of Rasul Douglas, and you know that I'm always a huge fan of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, but that's having your hands full. And I think if those players aren't able to go, you lose Johnson. I think they're going to really try to make an effort to pick on whoever is filling in for him or whatever you try to throw at the middle of the field. And if he's gone and Dane's gone, I think you're seeing explosive shots and just the effort to try and get the ball down the field to guys like Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. Because again, it's not a cornerback room that really presents itself as one that's good on 50-50 receivers, at least not elite. I'm worried about that component to it. So I think ultimately for me, my confidence level is going to really ride on how healthy this defense will be or how injured they will be going into the game. But again, no matter how the cards fall, the offense is how you have to win this game. And if Joe Brady has a game plan that, even laps what they did against the Jets, and you're seeing again focused people getting schemed open, the wrinkles that have been pointed out that are able to get this team more productive, I think you can go toe to toe with the NFC champs and maybe even pull off the upset, even though you're only a 3.5 spread. So Josh, final thoughts on this game, final thoughts on this matchup before we say goodbye?
It's an opportunity for the Bills to right a lot of wrongs that happened the weeks before this game. If they can beat the Eagles in Philadelphia, go into the bye week at 7-5, it kind of resets and refocuses this team in what has become a very winnable AFC when you look at some of the unfortunate quarterback injuries, you look at the fact that the Chargers are really struggling, you look at the fact that the Jets are in a tailspin, no pun intended with the Jet thing. But I think this is such an opportunity here for the Bills. It is a tall task, but if they find a way to win this game, it is going to feel like a full-on reset, and it's going to be game on for these Bills down the stretch as they try to find their way back into the AFC playoff mix. I'm excited to see it play out. You mentioned it's weird to see the Bills in the trap game mindset. They've earned that this year with their 6-5 record, but I think, and I think you think, there is enough talent on this team and potential on this team to punch with anybody in this sport. And I think they have the ability to get their way out of that and to get back up in the upper echelon. But you got to prove it on the field. And boy, oh boy, do they have a great opportunity on Sunday to do that.
They've also played every game they've been in, even the losses tight, which is unfortunate because you've lost to some bad teams. Right. But it's not like they've been a team that's been boat raced. Again, just real fast. Have to knock on wood for that one too. I listen, I'm a firm believer in jinxing things, so I have to knock on some wood. I might be psychotic, but if I have to have one takeaway from this conversation, this episode, and my final thought on the game itself, my request to the Buffalo Bills is go back to being the Buffalo Bills. And the last couple of years, this has been an AFC East winning team with double-digit wins and one of the powerhouses of the AFC. And it's a separate conversation for what happens after they get to the playoffs. But ultimately, they are a top team year after year. And it feels like this is a team that has been in an identity crisis. And that game against the Jets felt like, again, a step in the right direction, but a very minor one. We don't know what it looks like after. So my request to the Bills is you are the underdog. You have earned the right, like you said, Josh, to be a trap game. Go into Philly and show everyone on national media, all your fans, everybody, that you are the team that belongs there and win. No matter how you got to do it, no matter how ugly it is, no matter who gets hurt, no matter what flukes happen or not, win. And earn that respect going into the bye week, heal up after the bye week, get out of it, and finish business against Kansas City, Dallas, Chargers, and all the rest of the teams you have to deal with. Be the Bills again. Be the team that we have gotten used to watching over the past 3 years and restore some confidence in this fan base because it's not too late. And if you can do that, the discourse is going to be a lot more fun the next couple of weeks, and I'm hoping for it. So that's my final message. Josh, take a bow. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you. Tell everyone in our chat right now where they can find you, when you go live, and what to expect.
Joe, it was an absolute honor to be on the first Tuesday night edition of Under Review. I'm a big fan of yours, big fan of Cover One. So wishing the best for you in this new venture for you. You can find me over on Twitter at Bill's Chat Pod. I know it's X now. It's always going to be Twitter to me. It takes me a while to come around to that. My podcast partner, Luca, and I are live every Friday night on the Built-in Buffalo Network. And then our podcast drops, Bill's Chat Podcast. It's not the live show feed. It is a fresh podcast. We record Sunday night, so there's post-game to it. Every Monday morning, everywhere your podcast can be found. And we do have a new YouTube channel we're trying to build. You can find us there at Bill's Chat Pod.
Josh and Luca do a great job. They're fun guests to get on this show, and they deserve your time and attention and your engagement. So please do them the favor and go check them out. I love having Josh and Luca here. You were a great guest as always, man. And I appreciate you on short notice. Like I can't say enough good things about you guys, so it means a lot. For all of you in the chat tonight, before you sign off, I have to tell you one thing. Don't do that, because right after this show is a man who was actually on the show this past weekend, Mr. Anthony Prohaska and Disguised Coverage, another elite member of the Cover One team, giving you an informative episode on all of the fun that you just witnessed against the Jets. It is going to be a great episode, so please don't close your YouTube. Don't sign out of your account. Don't go to sleep. How would you ever go to sleep when you could watch a great show like Disguised Coverage? Again, just another example of some of the awesome content on this network. But for all of you in the chat, thank you so much for tuning into the first ever Tuesday night episode of Under Review. I am here to stay. 7:30 p.m. every Tuesday night. We go live. I'll be back next week with another awesome guest and hopefully a smile on my face from a really awesome win. But even if not, I'll smile and hide the pain anyways and try to do a great show for all of you. Josh, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Everyone in the chat, if you could do me a favor, check out the One Pass, drop a like, subscribe to Cover One. I appreciate you. Have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. If you are celebrating, enjoy the time with your family, enjoy the food on the table, take a nap on the couch, enjoy some sweets, break your diet. It is the day to relax and have some fun. And we are wishing you, everyone here at Cover One, a very happy and safe holiday for each and every one of you. Thank you again so much for being here. From the bottom of my heart, it means the world to me. I will see you next week. And as always, go Bills. We'll see you soon, everybody.